as entrepreneurs, you never take no. And you try and find out alternate means of achieving your goal. And you will have many setbacks, but I would never take no. You have to have that quality of passion combined with determination and perseverance. The right word is grit, to make your journey happen. And that's what we try to do. If I look back at the journey, I mean, to me, growth is important. Every organization has to grow. Its growth is like oxygen. If you don't grow, then it will not satisfy, of course, the promoters or the owners. It will not create challenge for the employees. It will not be a challenge to associates, customers, as well as the society. So growth is very important. And the biggest challenge I find is that how can you make professionals be like owners, As owners, I can take a risk. I can be agile. I will not be looking at work-life balance if need be. And I would want each and every person in the organization to behave like that. And for that, the work has to be very interesting. It has to be very challenging. People should enjoy doing that. And I've seen that when people enjoy doing what they are doing, then they will forget about the work-life balance. They will continue doing it because they're enjoying it. So I think creating the ownership mindset within employees is a big, big challenge, especially within the family-managed organizations. And of course, it starts at the top. You have to create a challenge. You have to empower them. You have to make them take risks. It's okay to fail. Give them some wealth-making kind of opportunities through ESOPs and things like that. But I think that's the biggest challenge. So I think the initial starting point is how do you increase market share? And once you become a market leader, then the whole challenge changes. From getting market share, because beyond 57%, how much can I go up, So my challenge then is to increase market size. Can I make more and more people buy my products? So I'll give you example for, say, Colgate. Most people in India, they brush their teeth only once a day. Colgate has a market share of, I think, upwards of 60% in oral care. All they have to do is to go on convincing people that you have to brush your teeth twice a day, morning and before you go to sleep. And your market can virtually double if everybody does it. Everybody will not be able to do it, but I think that's the route they need to follow. So the same thing in case of us. We try to talk about the benefits of hair oiling. Why do they need to oil their hair? And then in the modern big towns, amongst youths, we started seeing that people don't want to apply oil and go out. So what do you do? And we said that can we tell them to use oiling before shampooing because it has a conditioning effect. So we came out with the campaign, 1 hour champi kiya. Have you oiled your hair 1 hour champi kiya before your shampooing, And I think that, again, played a role. So what I'm trying to say is that the second step for us was to increase market size. So we said to us that we have to protect ourselves because people are changing their habits from oiling to something else. Can we become market leaders in what is known as pre- and post-wash hair solutions? So pre would mean Ayurvedic hair oils and other things. Post-wash would be hair creams, hair gels, hair serums. So we have a complete range in pre-oiling as well as post-wash. We are not present so much in shampoos. We've just entered shampoo. But design, we said that we have to be in categories where we see ourselves market leaders. Because if you are a market leader, then it gives you economies of scale. It gives you a pricing power in terms of inflation. You have to be the first step. You don't have to wait for some other market leader to take that step. And of course, the margins are much higher. And if I look at our portfolio of products, almost in 95% of our portfolio products, we are the market leaders in that particular segment. For example, in Saffola, we are only in premium edible oils at a higher price point. We are the market leaders. So on. And then the next phase of expansion happened when we started going outside India. Initially, I was asking people that, okay, the local team to handle international business. But invariably, because Indian market was so large, it would just not get the right attention. People would not pay the right attention. And until one fine day, we said that if international is so important, we have to remove what we call escape buttons. So take a full-time senior person heading the international business, and that person's job is only international. So we recruited a very senior person at a very senior level without any business. And his job was to identify newer markets where we had an opportunity through organic route, through inorganic route. We started with Middle East, then we went to Bangladesh, and then we have made acquisitions. So now we are present in Egypt, South Africa, Vietnam. These are the core markets where we have our own factories. But today, international forms about, I think, about 27% of our turnover. And I think that is giving us not only growth, but I think it is giving us the outside window of what is happening outside India. It's very important that in today's world, you try and see what is happening in other parts of the world. And you know, that gives you, so it gives people an opportunity to travel, to be posted there. With 4 different profit centers at smaller scale, we can test out talent in terms of profit center head roles. So all in all, it is just not growth where we are pursuing international, but looking at other qualitative factors which help the organization. And our international business is actually, as of today, is making more margins, more money than the Indian in terms of percentage of gross margins. Depending on the kind of business you are in, you can have a long-term journey. And if you look at the FMCG sectors around the world, so whether it's Unilever or Procter & Gamble or L'Oreal, or all these started as family-managed FMCG companies, global companies. And they're continuing for not maybe 200 years, 300 years, because I think there are some entry barriers in our business. The entry barriers so far were more in the area of distribution, in the area of big marketing budgets, of creating brands. Now, some of the entry barriers have got reduced because of the emergence of digital brands, where you don't need distribution. But you can reach only a certain level of size if you are digital, you know. But coming back to your question about perpetuity, I think what kind of businesses can be perpetual? I would say one which is a defensive business, which doesn't get impacted by discontinuities because of technology. Technology is the biggest disruptor. In our case, technology relatively plays a lesser role. The other disruptions are geopolitical disruptions. So or competitive disruptions. In all cases, our sector is still, in my opinion, defensive. And I can see, even if I'm not there tomorrow, the company will continue. I think it has to be managed by the right team and the right CEO. I think, and that's where the role of the board comes in. The role of the board, and many times I've seen many organizations, the board looks at some ridiculously mundane issues, you know, and spends too much time in operational issues and quarterly, but they don't spend time in ensuring that the CEO and the team, are they the most effective? And the role of the board is to actually have the best CEO and the best team, so that if you have that, automatically magic will happen, in my opinion. If you want to get into perpetuity, you have to have the right business, you have to have the right board, you have to have the right strategy, the purpose, and the values and the culture. And the board has to monitor all these 3 things on a yearly basis. So we have a very strong culture, and we measure our values, something like 30 values, every year amongst each and every employee who is working with us. And wherever we see some dip in scores, the HR will go and step in and then see what is to be done to improve in that area.
In your investing journey, and especially now with Ascent as well, what motivated you to get into that? It's really, I mean, I know so many people who benefit from time with you, and you know, it's fairly selfless to be able to create that kind of time and give it to different people. A lot of them are not even your investee companies as well. Yes, but to be able to...
None of them are.
Yeah. To create that kind of time and to do that, I would really love to know what motivates you to do this.
So I think the starting point...
And stay motivated.
Starting point is I don't know the art of doing nothing, okay? I have to be occupied continuously. I cannot just sit at home and not do anything. So when I stepped down, I knew that I would say negotiated with my caller or arrived at an understanding with my MD that we'll have review meetings on this time. Only these issues will come to me, these issues will be handled by you. So I knew that I will have a lot of spare time. And I had to find out new ways of occupying my time. So I wrote a book, which took some time. And I started speaking at such events at least 2-3 times a month. And then I said that I have to give something back to the society. But my way of giving something back is what I call active giving. I have to be involved in it. It's just not a donation which I give it to school or a hospital, but I have to be actively involved in that particular journey. And that means if I have to be I have to be passionate about that subject. So I chose 3 subjects. One was entrepreneurship. And I strongly believe that it is entrepreneurs only will take the India to a greater height. So that's how I started Ascent, which is a platform for entrepreneurs to learn from each other. We have something like 1,100 entrepreneurs in a part of that platform. Total aggregate turnover is more than 1 lakh crores, 1,30,000 crores. And we started in Bombay, we went to Chennai, now we are going all over India. And basically, most entrepreneurs have similar problems. And their most problems are about human resources, about family, in terms of if it is family managed organization, about funding. And I think we can create platforms for them to learn. We have a lot of huddle sessions, they learn from each other. So if any of the audience, they want to, if they know anybody who wants to become members, it's funded by me. And I spend about 20% of my time. I mentor on an average at least 10 entrepreneurs every month. So we have a small commitment fee so that people take us seriously. Earlier everything was free, but now that commitment fee entitles you to attend all the events, which are 3-4 events in a month. So anybody wants to join, you have to have minimum turnover. If it is, you are in manufacturing, it's 5 crores. In services, you have to be 1 crore plus. So you need to go to www.ascentfoundation.in and all the information is given there. In addition to that, I'm very passionate about innovation, so I spend a lot of time on Marico Innovation Foundation, which is supported by Marico. But that reports to me directly. That doesn't report to the managing director. And the third thing is in the area of mental health. So we are mental health. So my daughter manages that, and we do a lot of work in the area of mental health. We are supporting about 50 mental health organizations across India. We realize that in big towns, it's easy to get mental health professionals, but smaller towns, there's nobody available. So these organizations train grassroots workers to resolve mental health issues. We've done a lot of studies on climate change, mental health, suicide, mental health. We're also running a free help call line, which is managed by TIS, but we are funding them. So I keep doing all this and I'm enjoying doing that.